Hey, and welcome to the webinar for today. So excited to see so many of you joining in. We saw a lot of you out there in the waiting room just a few minutes ago, so that's amazing. We're just going to wait about 1 minute while we wait for everyone to get in from the waiting room or those that may be joining in here as we are just getting started. So just hang tight for a second here. We will get started here just shortly. I'm just going to wait 1 minute while we wait for everyone to fill in. We don't want anyone to miss out on this really cool update that we've got coming for you as we go through it today. So amazing to see all of you filtering in. Thank you so much. Glad to see you all coming in from all over the world. Looking forward to a great webinar today with some of our hosts here from NTC. And we will wait just about 1 minute for those of you still joining in. Don't worry, we will get started here shortly as we wait for everyone to fill up. All right. Definitely see some folks still coming in, but I think we have a pretty good amount of folks in here. Thank you so much. Love seeing all of the great attendees from everywhere, all over the world here joining us today. Amazing. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going through our announcement of the Nautobot ecosystem, our mega release. The richest feature set and most powerful applications to date coming to you from network to code. Today presenting will be myself, Tim Shryack here hosting the event, and with me will be John Anderson and Christian Serbu going through all of our sessions here as we go through today. We are going to talk about the core improvements coming into Nautobot 2.4. As I mentioned, while it's not a major release, technically, it is really a mega release with so many great new updates. We'll also talk about the Nautobot app ecosystem, some new and improved apps there, and a little sneak peek at perhaps what's coming in the very near future. Of course, Q&A. Please do use the Q&A box. We prefer that, so that way we can make sure that we can share your questions and get them answered with everyone here in the group. As well as, don't forget, you have the ability to react here. It is down under the controls. If you like something we're talking about, please give us a thumbs up or a heart emoji or whatever. We love the reactions, so that way we know we're keying in on things that are of interest to you. And then, of course, we'll close out with some summary at the end. So just a quick summary for those maybe that may be joining and aren't familiar with Nautobot already, just a quick idea about what it is. It is built and intended for enterprise class and enterprise grade applications. At its core, it's a network source of truth. But one of the things that we have found over time is that we need to not only be able to document things, but we need to actually be able to use that data to drive change, to actually empower our organizations. And that's where the automation platform, that's a key component of our Nautobot platform, comes into play. It is absolutely extensible and usable within your environment, whether that's via the GraphQL endpoint, webhooks, integrations with Git or GitHub, and of course, the REST API. So an incredibly powerful platform intended for driving your business forward. With that, we're going to move into our core improvements here. This is going to be Nautobot 2.4, and I'm going to hand off to John Anderson, who will take this next section.
All right, thanks, Tim. Very excited to be back with everyone. As Tim mentioned, Nautobot 2.4 is a huge release for us, but it is still a minor release. So just want to point out, everything that you see here still is, fully backwards compatible for folks that are looking to upgrade and things like that. As Tim mentioned, we are always striving to build enterprise, grade software. So our commitment towards, safe upgrades and so forth is very evident in this release. But we're going to kick it off here. The first thing I'd love to talk about is this event publication framework. And this is targeting event-driven automation needs from our larger enterprise customers. So what this is all about is we now have an event subsystem within Nautobot that takes interesting events that are happening in the system. So when you're modifying data, when new devices are getting created, when you're updating IP addresses, moving VLANs around and things like that, right? But also job events. So when you kick off a job or a job succeeds or a job fails for whatever reason, those are now all types of events that we can trigger notifications through configurable event brokers out into an automated ecosystem of subscribers to those event buses. So this is a very typical type of event bus architecture that you'd find in larger enterprises. or organizations that are really looking for more real-time processing of automated infrastructure and data and so forth. So Nautobot now has some real first-class citizen feature sets here. And what we provide out of the box in release 2.4 are built-in event broker connectors for Redis. And we have a syslog example, and we're working on some Kafka support as well. So what we also provide is the base and the documentation for you to be able to build your own event brokers as you see fit in your environment. Maybe something that's custom in-house, or another open source product or something like that. You can very easily integrate this feature set, and of course it's all configurable, so you can have full control over the types of events that you care about that are happening within Nautobot, how they get published into those different event brokers. You can have different event brokers configured to different event types and so forth, right? But the possibilities from an automation perspective are really exciting here. Integrating these with downstream systems, maybe we've got a ServiceNow connector that's hooked up to this event bus that's reacting in real time to events that are going on within Nautobot now. Or maybe we're modifying our downstream network monitoring and management systems, modifying alerts in Splunk and so forth, right? So we're really excited to see where you all are able to take this feature set in the future. We really think, this definitely ties into Nautobot's desire to not only combine the network source of truth with automation, but really the integrations throughout the ecosystem. So not only within our platform, but how you can integrate it within the rest of your ecosystem. Right. Thanks, Tim. We can move on from here. Yeah, so the next thing, we've got several network data models that are new within the system. So the first is our enterprise wireless data model set. So this is targeting enterprise deployments of wireless access configurations, right? So if you think, Aruba or Cisco Wireless, or how Meraki does deployments, so controller-based architectures, is primarily what this is targeting, but it does also support, certain controller-less wireless deployment options. But really what this is about is our recognition of how people expect to manage this from a network source of truth standpoint, right? We really want to model how wireless enterprise deployments work in the real world, especially how the vendors are actually doing it, right? We obviously take a vendor neutral approach in the data model. We're not tied to any of the vendors either displayed on the screen here or that exist otherwise within the ecosystem, but we kind of find the commonalities between them from a data modeling standpoint, so that you can model things like your radio profiles and your SSID profiles, and how those actually get configured, how groups of access points are deployed realistically in multi-geographical types of environments, where you've got maybe branch sites and you've got different access point groups, and different configurations for different VLANs and things like that, right? So you can see some examples of the different, common wireless architectures that this data model definitely supports. Central versus standalone controller architectures. Mesh versus bridges connectivity in terms of how we get that traffic back out of the controller and so forth, right? So this builds on the existing controller data model that we've supported within Nautobot for some time now for non-wireless types of deployments. So things like SDN controllers and so forth, right? And this adds the wireless specific data modeling components to it. So we go to the next slide, Tim. Yeah, so as far as what this data model does comprise, as I mentioned, it's tracking the wireless network profiles, so your SSID configuration and how those relate to the groups of access points that those SSIDs would be configured within the network. So we don't have to worry about the granularity of saying, I've got 10,000 access points in my enterprise and I need to configure this SSID on every single one of them, right? We can group those in meaningful ways in what we call controller managed device groups. And then those device groups obviously can relate to locations, they can be hierarchical in nature, and they relate ultimately back to the controllers that have purview over those devices. So that's how we manage the access point groupings, and then we apply the wireless network and radio profiles to those device groups and so forth, right? So again, really it's our recognition that we want our solution to be very enterprise friendly, very enterprise first, and you can obviously see how this data model is going to be very prime for SSoT integrations within our ecosystem to actually apply this configuration to the controllers or read the configuration back into Nautobot to give you that first pane of glass for from a network automation and data standpoint. All right, next up is virtual device contexts. So this is all about a logical slicing of devices, right? Different vendors have different names for this type of technology. Cisco does actually call it, like Nexus Virtual Device Context. Juniper, I believe, is Logical Systems, Arista Multi-Instance EOS, for instance, and so on. But what this, fundamentally is about in the networking world is taking a physical piece of hardware and logically slicing it into virtual sets of resources that we would typically use in like a multi-tenant type environment where we want this set of interfaces on this device and its associated VRF configuration to be logically separated from other customers that might exist on that physical device, right? So in our data model, we do a lot of specific things, and again, this is entirely vendor neutral. We can support not only the names and logos that you see on the right there, but we do feel that we can support pretty much any vendor construct that plays in this same domain of logically separating different customers, different logical intents within a physical device. So as you can imagine, excuse me. So you imagine, this virtual device context obviously relates to the device that they're on, but some interesting things that you can do, is, obviously associating the different interfaces from the parent device that would be associated to the different VDCs. And we do support the cases where interfaces might belong to multiple VDCs. Some vendors do support that. And that's a good example of how we can use our extensibility feature set within Nautobot to maybe put a constraint on that, where if that's not realistic in our environment, we can still enforce that, hey, we don't want interfaces to span multiple VDCs. So that's a great example of how we can combine feature sets within Nautobot to kind of suit our specific data modeling needs. Another great example of that is how we might use virtual device contexts in concert with other features like chassis modules, where maybe we have a larger piece of hardware that is a chassis-based system with different line cards and so forth. That represents the physical entity of that device, right? We can model those relationships with um, chassis modules. And then we can use virtual device context on top of that because we have logically sliced that device for different purposes. A good example of that might be how some of the larger F5 boxes work, for instance. So again, it's kind of how we can pick and choose the different data modeling features that Nautobot provides to suit our organization's, specific networking needs here. Next up is a really cool new feature, the Jinja template rendering tool that is now built directly into Nautobot. So a lot of our users use an app called Golden Config, and you'll hear from my colleague here a little bit later about some new capabilities there. But Golden Config is a core tenet of it is using Jinja templating to build actual device intended configuration, and then obviously dealing with the remediation and config drift aspects of that. One of the big things that comes from a network automation standpoint when we're doing that is the fact that we have to build these templates, we have to manage them. So what this tool allows us to do is have a really quick interface that is local to our organization. So there are obviously tools like this that you may be aware of that are out on the internet and so forth, right? Um, we wouldn't want to put our organization's data out on the internet, for that purpose. So having this feature set directly in Nautobot is a really awesome way to quickly build and iterate on these templates as we go. So as you can see, obviously you've got the ability to modify your template on the fly here, and then you can paste in the data that you want that would be passed to this template. And this is the base level functionality, right? So this is kind of like the general purpose. I want to, play with a template or develop it a little bit more. You'll see later on in the webinar how we've do have a feature specific to Golden Config that takes this 10 steps further, where it's actually integrating data within Nautobot to make that Golden Config set of use cases even more easier to adopt. All right. And there's so much more in the Nautobot 2.4 core release itself. Too much to be able to go into in a webinar here today. These are some of the other highlights. There's even more in the release notes, right? If you were to check it out, then we can even put in this slide alone. There's a couple that I will call out here that are quite interesting. So the first one here is the UI component framework. This is a developer focused feature. So if you are building Nautobot apps within your organization and your environment, this is going to be very key to you in understanding as we go forward with the evolution of the Nautobot app ecosystem and the APIs that we provide there. What we've built here in this UI component framework is a set of abstractions that uh, get away from all of the boilerplate that is writing HTML templates and ultimately building front-end UI code. So basically, we want you to be able to focus on the network data models that got you into a place where you want to build an Autobot app in the first place, and the automation business logic that's tied to those models. Let's focus on that and remove the need to have to deal with the development complexities and the annoying maintenance overhead of just the UI code base itself, right? So this UI component framework is a Python-based API that integrates with what we call the Nautobot UI view set very well, so that we can very easily, in just a couple lines of Python code, describe how we want to display data within the UI. And this also forces standardization in the look and feel of the application. And selfishly, from our standpoint, what it also allows is some upgrade protection, right? So we want to be able to make some further evolution within the tools and technology and the look and feel of the application from a UI and GUI perspective. And the way that we'll be able to do that and protect not only our own ecosystem, but you in the apps that you're building within your organization from an upgrade durability standpoint is if we can get everyone to migrate over to this UI component framework, we can change how the front end is rendered, and you don't have to make any updates to your code, right? You don't have to deal with, moving HTML, source code around and stuff like that, right? So really powerful development feature set there. Another one here is we have a lot of customers that have deployed Nautobot in a Kubernetes environment. And one of the things that we often hear about is the fact that the job execution framework, which is based on an open source project called Celery, which is basically the powerhouse for how jobs actually get executed, that architecturally is not a very cloud native solution. And Kubernetes, obviously being container based, we want to build kind of cloud native or at least cloud friendly types of software architectures. So what we offer in this is a deeper integration within the Kubernetes environment to execute jobs without the use of Celery. So we can actually get rid of the Celery-based infrastructure, these kind of really big fat pods that exist in Kubernetes, can get rid of those altogether, and we can execute our jobs directly on Kubernetes as they are Kubernetes jobs. So they're ephemeral containers that spin up. If you didn't follow any of that at all, don't worry. What it amounts to is a more cloud native way of actually deploying Nautobot in a Kubernetes-based environment. And then I'll call out two other things here that are performance related. So for folks that are interested in operating Nautobot at higher and higher scales, we've made a couple of enhancements in our REST API in specific cases where larger responses related to certain relations within the data model, have some more flexibility with some options to exclude certain relations and fields, so that can improve the REST API performance in that regard. And then the second is when dealing with bulk actions in the web interface. So when you want to select a bunch of devices and bulk edit them to apply, a new status or something like that, or you want to delete a bunch of data in bulk. We now process those as background jobs, so they're what we call system jobs in Autobot now. So we run them asynchronously, effectively, right? And then we'll notify you when those are completed. In the case of like import and export that we've done in the past, you obviously have the ability to then download that file when it's complete. So this is kind of from a performance standpoint, just helping us move the needle a little bit for folks that are dealing with larger and larger data sets and want to deal with those bulk actions, right? So again, there's a ton of content related to 2.4. Too much to go into today, but I do hope that some of these updates are exciting to you and give you a good reason to want to go and deploy a new instance of Nautobot or to upgrade one that you already have. But with that, I'll hand it back to Tim. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Great opening session here for us. Hope everyone got some great details out of there about what's coming in the core updates into Nautobot 2.4. For those of you maybe that got a little bit too deep into the weeds there as John was going into some of those details, here's the TLDR, right? Some amazing updates in event-driven automation that will really help power your team as you look to be able to take events that may be occurring on your network and then react to those. The wireless modeling capability. This is something that we've been asked for a lot. So here we're finally starting to really expand this and build this out to allow you to model your infrastructure natively into the database. So great addition there in the core model. And then the Jinja templating capability coming in the UI. Also a great feature, really useful for folks that may not be as technical, that want to be able to consume Nautobot and its capabilities, especially as you'll see coming up in the Golden Configure application. Amazing updates there as well. Also cool, you'll just notice there one quick one that I thought was really interesting as well is the Kubernetes update for allowing to no longer require Celery. You just kind of notice here as you see the enterprise grade capabilities of Nautobot, this is really underscoring that as well as we do want to empower our large scale clients and users of Nautobot that are potentially doing things like OS upgrades on thousands of devices. This is a great addition there as well to really power that and not necessarily require the use of Celery in order to do that. That was some of the details there that John was giving us. Next up here, we're going to move now into our Nautobot ecosystem, the new and improved apps, providing some new features and improved capabilities. To take us through this section is going to be Christian Seru, and I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, thanks, team. So kind of to start it off, we're going to look at something that is not an app, but it's the presentation, let's say, for our application ecosystem, right? This is a page that we've added under the app section in Nautobot 2.4. And here you are able to see a listing of all the apps that we have in this ecosystem, both open source apps and those that are available through an engagement with Network to Code that is under a commercial license. You've got information about, kind of a description, a short blurb about what the application does. You've got links to documentation, should documentation be publicly available for it, which it is for most of our apps out on docs.nautobot.com. And for those of you that would like to, you see an app and you want to install it right away, you even have the package name in there, so you don't even need to go anywhere else. This marketplace hopefully will make it easier for everyone to discover and learn more about all the solutions that we have in this ecosystem. Solutions that are pretty much out there, deployed today in our customers' networks. They are solving real-life network automation challenges, and they are first-party apps that Network to Code has created. So these are enterprise-grade applications. We support them, we develop them, we maintain them, and we provide support for them. So this is going to be there from, it's an Nautobot 2.4 feature. You're going to have this in addition to the ability to, even today, you've got the Network to Code website, you've got the docs.nautobot.com. All of these, hopefully, they will provide more visibility into all the solutions that we have for network automation challenges and helping you build your environment. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so the first app updates, they come in for the most popular app we have, really, which is the Golden Configuration app. For those that are not very familiar with it, this is an Autobot app that allows network operators to perform a few operations that relate to managing the configuration of your network devices. So you can create backups of your network device configuration. You can generate configuration of your devices based on the data that you have in Nautobot for those devices. So we call these intended configs. And then what it also does, it allows you to compare these backups to the intended configs and perform what we call compliance and remediation. That is, give you kind of what's the difference between the existing state of the network and the intended state of the network, and allow you to, or give you the steps required to get to the intended, right? If there's a difference between them. So the feature that I'm presenting to you today comes in to help network automation engineers that are developing templates and data, or the API queries that feed that data to the templates, really. So to help this workflow for those that are feeding into this intended configuration generation feature, right? And this tool is available in the UI. It allows the template developers or automation engineers to test out this feature without having to make changes to the actual production, let's call it production templates, right? The data comes from Nautobot, but what this allows you to do is it allows you to override temporarily only in this UI, so without any permanent changes. It allows you to override the GraphQL query that feeds the data into the templates. So let's say you are developing that GraphQL query, but you don't want to break anything in the normal flow of other colleagues or operations teams that are already using the golden configuration compliance features. So you can choose another GraphQL query for a particular device. And this UI provides to you the what data comes in from the API live, right? So you can select for a particular device, you can select the GraphQL query, and you will get that data in the right-hand pane there. In addition to that, you can also now, as of Nautobot 2.4.2, you can override the Git repository branch. So this provides to you kind of a DevOps style development workflow whereby you can now create a branch on your templates repository. So you're, again, the common theme is you are able to test things out without affecting your normal environment, your regular production environment for intended config generation and compliance afterwards. So you're able to override the branch, use a different branch. So let's say you have some template changes that you want to make. You can now make them into a branch. You push them up into your GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. And then in Nautobot, you will be able to use this additional branch to render what would the result of the intended config look like. And on the right-hand side, you will be able to see, once you've selected the branch and the GraphQL query, using the default one for either is perfectly fine. This is all kind of at your fingertips here. So you can see the end result. So the configuration tab has the render template, then the data tab has the API data that was used to render it. And finally, if there's a difference between this configuration and the one that is stored in the Nautobot database, then in the diff tab, you will see a difference between them, so that you can say, okay, I'm making some changes to my templates, but the end result should be the same. Now you can validate that before running any jobs across, all of your devices or within a particular group. So this feature is available today. It's released in Golden Config 2.3.0, and you can also test it out in the public sandbox that we have, demo.nautobot.com. Should you, if you're not already at Nautobot 2.4, you can try it out online without too much hassle. Next up, we've got the floor plan app. This one is an app that enhances the Nautobot location and rack modeling by allowing you to create a grid representation of a data center floor plan. It could be a data center floor plan, but realistically, you could have a 2x2 wiring closet, right? So you define what is that grid. And then on it, you can indicate the placement of each rack on that floor plan. So the improvements that we are seeing here today to this app is that you are able to greatly customize how this floor plan looks like and how it is organized, right? So what you can do is you have different a variety of different labeling and numbering systems for the X and Y axis. You might see here in the screenshot that on the x-axis, you're going in 5 increments of 5 numerically, and on the y-axis, you're using letters. But you can combine letters and numbers together. You can use the Roman numerals, you can use Greek letters, and even for those special cases, you could use binary or hex. So you've got a bit of freedom in how you're numbering your data center floor plan. So hopefully this makes it easier to reflect what is there in real life. Now, we also have a couple of additional tweaks here, or additional features that allow you to section off or to mark certain tiles as to what they're doing or what status they have. So you can now put a particular status or group together a bunch of tiles. You see here in the screenshot, again, you've got various colorizations here which relate to various statuses and such. And finally, if you have really large floor plans, you can now zoom in and out. You can press the Shift key and then use your mouse wheel, and you can zoom in and out while hovering above the floor plan to help you navigate them a little bit easier. And to kind of top it off, there is a detailed blog post over at network2code.com/blog, where you can find the all the new features in the floor plan app with screenshots and a little bit more detail than we can fit in today. All right, so the SSoT app also has quite a few updates. Like this is pretty impressive. So the SSoT framework facilitates an integration and data synchronization between various source of truth systems, with kind of Nautobot acting as a central clearinghouse for data, right? This is kind of the idea. So in order to achieve this, we have a bunch of integrations. So think of them as ways for Nautobot to talk to other external systems. These integrations, we have launched 8 new integrations with the latest releases, and that takes us to a grand total of 14. As you can see, some of the logos here on the page, they are various types of systems, and these integrations will allow you, depending, again, it depends on the various integration, but they will allow you to get data from the external system into Nautobot, or from Nautobot to the external system, or both. And this SSoT app also provides a framework for those more programming oriented or having more advanced use cases, or maybe some other systems in-house that they want to synchronize data from. You are able to use this framework to develop your own SSoT integrations or apps on top of it, so that you can synchronize data to and from your internal systems. All right. Next up, one of our kind of most advanced open source apps has gotten a lot better. The new enhancements added in here are around tracking the life cycle of a network design and the generated data in Nautobot. Again, a little bit of an intro for those of you that are not familiar with what Design Builder does. It provides a framework to develop a standardized network design, which produces or updates a collection of objects within Nautobot. So this allows you to build programmatically from a standardized design, build a ton of objects in Nautobot, right? And what's new here, right? So this has been around for a while, and it allowed you to create a design and populate the data into Nautobot, but it was kind of a fire and forget type of operation. So you would generate the data, the objects would get created, and that was it. And now the update to it really provides kind of a more complete solution around tracking the whole life cycle of this design, right? So it allows you to update it. Designs really have a life cycle themselves. They will evolve over time. They will have different versions. The kind of new design deployment feature, which we have here, adds a lot of features for modifying objects based on changes to that design and tracking all of these changes and making sure that you know where objects come from. That would be the traceability feature. And it allows also for bringing in, you might have a new site or a new design and everything is greenfield is a lot easier. But what if you have existing data that you want to pull into a design, standardize it, and then replicate it across the board? Now you also are able to do this onboarding of your existing designs. So it's a pretty robust set of features, which is fantastic, because now you know you have even more tools that allow you to build this kind of standardized network design, which is a critical component in any successful network automation strategy, right? So you've got all of these additional features to round it off. So I hope this is pretty exciting. And what I would like to say also is that all the apps that we've talked about so far, they are all the features, let's say, of these apps. They are all released and available today. They are all open source apps, and I hope this showcases Network to Code's continued commitment to open source and the network automation community out there. All right, and finally, we have a network of observability app to talk about, and this is one of our newer apps. We also call it NetObs. Obviously, people are lazy. You would like to say fewer words, so I might say NetObs out of sheer habit every now and then. So this app takes the helps you take your observability stack to a next level by enriching all the metrics that come out of your telemetry stack that you might have, your Prometheus and friends. So you enrich those metrics with source of truth data from Nautobot. Which means that, again, you can build better graphs, you can build better alerts, add more detail in there that will actually be useful to those on the receiving end of those alerts, for example, that have to fix the network or figure out what's going wrong. So it is a lot about enriching these metrics. So, for example, let's say you have metrics about an interface, right? That interface is a circuit that is connected to some service provider. And now when you're sending those metrics to your telemetry platform, you can also enrich them by having additional data from Nautobot, such as, who's the provider of that circuit, let's say AT&T, what's the circuit ID, what is its status, let's say active, right? And what is the role of that circuit, its peering circuit to maybe, let's say, an IXP or to a upstream service provider. And with all of this data, you can now have a little bit more detail when it matters. So let's say when you were looking at graphs for all sorts of, let's say bandwidth utilization for all the routers in a particular region that terminate certain circuits from certain providers, you have that data already in your observability and telemetry system, right? So you don't need to start to correlate manually things, because all of that data is already provided as enriched metrics in there. And this also happens to help out with alerts, because you have more context, and that is very important. So let's say an interface goes down. I would like to know what I know what device it is, but now I can also know what the role is of that device. Maybe it's a peering router, maybe it's not, right? So I can figure out what's going on, and also, is the status active or not? Maybe an alert on an interface that goes down on a router that's under provisioning doesn't really matter, right? But if it's an active in production device, then it actually matters. So this is kind of the NetOps app in a nutshell, right? And It is available today on Nautobot Cloud or through a formal services engagement with Network to Code. So if you are curious, do get in touch. That is all I have for you today. So Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Christian. Great summary of the updates that we have coming into some of our applications here in the 2.4 release. For those of you that may be looking for the TLDR, here we go. So first, Golden Config, right? Our number one most popular app. It is what empowers the idea of configuration compliance within the Nautobot ecosystem. It also enables you and your teams to be able to potentially start down the path of net DevOps, or how do I move to infrastructure as code in my environment? The Golden Config app is your answer to that problem. It solves immediate short-term problems of, is my environment in compliance with what I want? And then how can I maybe move into the future into a more modern way of managing my network? And we took that basic idea and we made it even better in this release, making it more usable, more consumable for your teams now, with the ability to handle Jinja templating right in the UI, do testing there and development all within the UI without impacting production. Amazing update there. Single source of truth. This is our application that allows you to synchronize data to and from Nautobot from other systems. Now we have even more supported systems out of the box. Of course, you can always use this application, whether on your own or through collaboration with us here at NTC. We can enable it to virtually any system there is, but out of the box, we now support 14 other tools. So a great implementation there that just makes it even easier to use. And then finally, a little bit about our Net Observability tool. It is an amazing way to enrich the data that you have in your telemetry and to make it more useful to your teams, to allow your tier one or your help desk or your monitoring teams to not have to look at 5 different screens. They can look at a single screen and see all the data they need to understand the root cause of a problem, get to that detail, be able to correlate things that may be hard to understand coming from telemetry, that don't have enough sufficient metadata around them. We can add that metadata in and present it to the user all dynamically on the back end. So when they see that graph or those details, it can be really helpful for them to be able to find problems more quickly and get to root cause faster. We have been getting a few questions coming in, so thank you for that. We will get to those. Don't worry, Q&A is coming up. But next up, we have John here coming back with a sneak peek of what's next. What can you expect coming from NTC in 2025?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, so as we mentioned, everything in this section is hot off the press. You will see this released out into the wild here this year, in the first half of this year. And first up here is Nautobot GPT. So yay, more AI from the industry, right? I say that tongue in cheek because here at Network to Code, we really do believe in a practical application of AI. And that's really what we've been trying to nail here with this offering that we call Nautobot GPT. This is a virtual assistant tailored towards Nautobot specific tasks. So one of the big things that it has been trained to do to date is to assist with the development of job code. So you can ask the Nautobot GPT assistant, hey, I've want to build a job that does this automation. I want to deploy device configurations, or I want to sync some data from this system that I've got internally, and the agent can produce actual viable job code for you to do this. And you can also go back and forth with it, right? So maybe you're having a problem with a job. You don't quite understand how to do some complex operation with maybe one of the variables with limiting the filter sets available. And you just want to ask it, hey, I'm having a problem with this variable. Can you help me out? And paste that code in. And we found that through the successful training efforts that we've done with it, it is very effective at really comprehending and understanding these Nautobot job specific use cases. And then, of course, through all of the material that it has been trained on, it's very good at answering any sort of Nautobot question that you throw at it. Hey, how can I, get data to look like this with the device model? Model this type of use case and so forth. It can also help you if you're doing, different GraphQL operations or things like that. Crafting queries. So this is really going to be our first offering here with in the AI space. This is Nautobot GPT. It's going to be an offering that you can also find in Nautobot Cloud. If you're unfamiliar with Nautobot Cloud, that is our fully managed Nautobot deployment infrastructure. So if you're looking for a solution where you don't have to host Nautobot on-prem, you want us to do that for you, that's Nautobot Cloud. So we'd love to talk to you about that. Users of Nautobot Cloud will be able to take advantage of Nautobot GPT here very soon, in just the next couple of weeks, honestly. And you'll be seeing more and more AI feature sets from us directly integrated into the application. Things like helping you to build data validation rules within the data validation engine. Other examples like trying to help understand in golden config, like what is the intent of this configuration? Tell me in plain English, what is this config block doing? Those are exciting things that we're kind of up to in the AI space within Nautobot. So next up is a new application specific to modeling DNS records. So just first and foremost, Nautobot's not going to be a DNS or DDI server kind of serving this infrastructure, but what this does help you with is actually tracking DNS zones. So you can create all of the common record types that that you'd expect. We will obviously take feedback from the community of what are the more kind of obscure record types that do exist out there, and we can easily add support for those over time. So this is obviously deeply integrated into the IPM infrastructure as well within Nautobot. We're very excited to see how people utilize this. We do have some examples, right, where you can build up entire zones and then have it spit out like a bind configuration for you using something like export templates, right? So very excited to see how people utilize this. This is also very close to being released, just a couple of weeks out. Next up, some updates to device lifecycle management. So this is an app that is already available today. So these are some further enhancements that are going to be available in the very near future with the next release of the DLM app. So device lifecycle management is all about trying to define your kind of organizational standards and policies for things like software versions and hardware. So collecting things like notices of end of support and end of sale from your vendors for both software and hardware are kind of at the core of what device lifecycle management does. And one of the additional feature sets that was added some time ago is the ability to track CVEs, or common vulnerabilities. So this new feature set extends that to have an automated integration where we can pull in CVE data directly from NIST directly into the app. And so you don't have to, manually deal with the, entering of that vulnerability data to be able to get the feature sets to know, like, hey, these are my vulnerable devices that are out there in the environment, or software versions that are of issue. We can pull that data directly down from NIST, build interesting reporting capabilities. That's the other kind of feature sets here, is we have some new dashboards for the reporting capabilities for things like hardware notices and so forth. So definitely excited about that. Again, this release you can expect in the coming months, kind of first half of this year. Okay. Next up is another new app that will be coming out. This is an integration with Ansible. So in particular, AAP and AWX. So the platforms that Ansible provides for execution of Ansible playbooks. So what we do here is we integrate with AAP and AWX to pull in those job templates so that you actually get a Nautobot jobs-like experience, but you're actually executing Ansible playbooks within AAP and AWX. So this is a really excellent use case for organizations that are looking to reduce the tool toil, right? Like it obviously may make sense for you to maintain that Ansible infrastructure, but maybe engineers are tired of dealing with yet another system that they need to log into to execute automation, right? They're already spending a ton of time in Nautobot because that is our network source of truth and is the center point for a lot of the automation that we have within the organization. So now this app will allow you to bring in the execution and serviceability of those Ansible job templates directly within Nautobot. Next up, version control. So this is a very fun app. We're very excited about the future of where this is going to be able to take Nautobot in different network source of truth use cases. If you've been following along with here, over the last bit of time as we've kind of evolved what this is going to be, don't fear, we're still working on this, right? And this year, first half of this year, we are going to have we're going to be announcing a private beta of the solution that we've got here. So do please reach out to us if you are very interested in being a part of that. We would love to have you participate and obviously provide feedback. What this is, what is version control, right? This is what we consider a very novel solution to the change management problem when it comes to a network source of truth, right? If we think about large enterprise use cases, or even some of the smaller guys do it right too, where you've got very rigid change control processes that ultimately have downstream effects in how we manage the data in our network source of truth. A very good example of that is, I can't actually implement a change on this interface. I can't bring this interface up until I'm in a change window, right? Maybe on a Saturday night or whatever, right? Um, but now I have this like weird state where it's like I'm building configuration with the data that's in my network source of truth. So I need that data to reflect the intent that I want that interface to be up. And typically I need to do that beforehand because I need to prep that change, right? I need to stage that change. I need to go through all of the paperwork of in my change management process of saying, this is what's going to happen in this change, which means I've got this conflict and kind of this timing constraint of when can I actually make that data change in my network source of truth versus what is actually reflected in the network, right? Because if we do that change too early and we have other types of automated integrations with our network source of truth, in particular monitoring platforms is where we see a lot of this problem, right? Because if our intent says too early that that interface should be up, and obviously it's not yet because we haven't gone through that change window, our monitoring system might be looking at our network source of truth and going, "There's a conflict here, right? Your intent says that interface is supposed to be up. It's not yet. So how do we rectify that?" Version control fundamentally is how we think that we're going to have a good solution to this. So this is integrating a particular product called Dolt from our partner Dolt Hub, where basically they have built a completely new database system that implements and combines the constructs of Git with a traditional relational database. And this goes beyond just schema management. This is the actual data within the database itself. So if you're unfamiliar with Git or GitOps principles, it's basically this idea that we have what we call our main branch, which is where we do most of our operations on, but I want to be able to propose a change. So in Git, we would call that, creating a branch, making our changes in our branch, committing those changes, submitting what's called a pull request so that we can get feedback on our change, right? Is our change appropriate? We can go through peer review within our engineering teams. We can get sign off from our change advisory board or so forth, right? Before we actually do what's called a merge back into the main, which is where we would actually implement that change. So if you're unfamiliar with Git, right, this is the idea that we can have this change staged as we might in a traditional infrastructure as code world, kind of sitting over here in parallel to what we're actually using on a day-to-day basis within the system. And then we can rectify those things at the appropriate time, like during the change window, for instance. But the advent of a solution like Dolt and what we're building with the version control app here is that you're not dealing with Git on the command line and kind of, text files, dealing with GitHub and things like that. This all happens within the UI, within the GUI of Nautobot itself. So you're interacting, you're proposing this change, you're creating new devices, updating those interfaces and so forth within Nautobot itself, just as you do on a regular basis. It's just not affecting anything until you actually click that merge button and those changes, kind of get merged into that mainline branch. So again, this is under active development. We're going to be targeting a private beta of this with interested parties in late Q2 of this year, targeting getting this out very soon after that. All right. And the last thing that I want to go through in terms of very soon to be released things is a new app for load balancer data models. So, we talked about wireless data models and VDCs earlier today. So this is load balancing is very much like that in that we're building a new set of network data models to model the basic constructs of load balancer configuration and infrastructure. So as is key with all of our data model decisions, we take a vendor agnostic approach here. But it is influenced obviously by the big players in the space, F5, Citrix, A10, etc. So we can obviously expect to be able to do things like traditional modeling of all of our front-end virtual servers, VIPs, the back-end pools, all of the profile configuration that you'd expect to be able to set, managing the health check configuration and so forth, right? And give you good visuals on kind of all of the infrastructure here. So this again will allow us to deeply integrate load balancing infrastructure and configuration into the overall network data model. You can expect SSoT integrations with this, with different vendor implementations in the future, but this also will be in the first half of this year as well. So with that, there's a lot of exciting updates coming later this year, kind of first half with these updates, but I'll hand it back over to Tim now.
Thanks, John. Yeah, we're going to move into the QA section. We did get a fair number of questions from you all. We are going to do our best to get through them. If you have questions, I did see a few hands raised in from the attendees. Please use the Q&A box. We want to get your question answered. We may run a little bit long, so hopefully you can stick around. We will try to get all of your questions answered here on the webinar here today. First up, for John and Christian, we got two that were kind of the same question, which basically boiled down to when are we going to be able to model VPNs and tunnels in the data model?
Yeah, great question. That's another one that comes up a lot too, for sure. And I can proudly say we are actively working on it right now. So that is another one that you will see a little bit later. We chose not to include it here because we're in very early stages of what we want to do there. And again, like every decision that we make from a data modeling standpoint, we want to make sure we get it right. And that we service, kind of the broad spectrum of needs, especially from our large enterprise customers. But I can say that we are actively working on it, and you can see some updates for that in the coming months.
Yeah, so we absolutely hear you. We are going to get this done for you. But as John mentioned, as all things at NTC, when we do it right. We do it right the first time, right? So we don't want to rush it out the door before it's ready. Next question coming in. What about wireless model support for, say, like backend infrastructure that you might have if you were a wireless ISP, maybe backhaul route radio or something like that. So kind of the ability to expand that model into more than what we might have today.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that definitely came up. So what you see is in our first iteration is again, kind of targeting wireless enterprise access deployments. But yeah, we've definitely talked about the WISP use cases in the past. I would say we'd love, if you could reach out to us, we could, maybe talk a little more specifically about what your expectations and needs are with that. But it's certainly something that would fit well within Nautobot.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just to highlight again, of course, here at Network to Code, we are always interested in hearing your feedback. And for those that want to engage with us, we can potentially also implement features more quickly if you're interested in engaging with us at a business level, not just consuming the open source project. So either way, but we're here to help, absolutely. Let's see. Sudeep, I know you had a question about learning and hands-on modules. I've got a slide exactly for you coming up, so I'm going to skip your question for a minute. We will get to you, though, don't worry. Next one came in from Bruno, which was, does the floor plan app have the ability to show the exact path of wiring and power cables, whether they're overhead or under tiles? Kind of interesting question, actually, when you think about the practical implications of building out in the data center. Sometimes it's useful to know where does this cable actually run, it's overhead, it's under the tile, etc.
Mhm.
Yeah, do
Yeah,
you want to take that one, Christian?
yeah, I can definitely. So right now, the floor plan app basically has. This is an interesting question because the view you have is kind of two-dimensional right now of your data center floor. I would see this as definitely being kind of one natural direction for this to develop in. But right now, today, you don't have any cable plant or any way of dragging the cables through the floor plan. While you could probably get creative with the new features that we introduced, they're not explicitly meant for modeling cables in there.
Yeah, but definitely something we could work on, depending
Mhm.
on interest from the community and our clients.
Absolutely.
Next question from Giri, I think. Sorry if I mispronounced that. For the Nautobot GTP, what LLM model is it using? Does it support a local LLM? Is it open source? Is it extensible?
Yeah, so the initial offering that we are going to have within Nautobot Cloud is integrated with OpenAI as a partner. We are exploring some options for local LLM models, especially as it relates to kind of enterprise constraints that are pretty prevalent these days. But yeah, we're very excited that the feature set that we have enabled kind of with that OpenAI integration for now. But yeah, just certainly we're open to the feedback, and it is something that we are thinking about.
Related is Nautobot GPT, an open source app. At the moment, it is going to be part of our Nautobot Cloud service. There may be future possibilities as we look at that, but of course, as always, everything that, especially these types of applications that you see us developing, they will be available first to our cloud consumers and our cloud users. Okay, let's see. Here we have another question coming in about the Ansible integration in the Ansible API, or the ability to utilize Ansible more tightly within Nautobot. Can you give us a simple use case of how you might use it in line with Nautobot? Say, is it attached from it how jobs are used? Is it the same as how you might use a job? Like a little bit more detail, I guess, just kind of on how you might use it in a pipeline.
Yeah, so it's a very jobs-like experience. So it is distinct from jobs, but the look and feel of how you interact with them is very similar to our jobs interface. So the example that you would see is kind of an organization that maybe already has a good bit invested in Ansible today, or where it makes sense. We've got other teams that are building Ansible playbooks and so forth, and we want to consume them in that way. So you can bring them into Nautobot and have that very similar user experience. Just the fact that they are, executing in an AAP or an AWX environment.
Got it. And then what about if you were integrating with Git? And how might you be using that as far as targeting a Git instance? Is it only for deploying of config, or is it for version control? I think this is the question behind the idea behind this question was about using Git and version control in combination.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll point out definitely, we have some very specific other Git integrations that exist today, have existed since kind of the dawn of Nautobot, where we can pull in certain data source elements from a Git repository. Most notably, like in the Golden Config example, your templates. And other aspects of how Golden Config is run today are sourced from Git repositories. So certain aspects of the kind of like the GitOps infrastructure's code flow work in that respect within Nautobot. There's other examples, like we can source what we call config context data, which is another part of our network data model. You can source that data from a Git repository today. And as far as how that existing feature set might align with version control, the constructs of Git are kind of the same fundamentally. It's different technologies under the hood, right? But if the question maybe is more centered, will I still be able to do those things with the version control app? The answer is definitely yes.
And then continuing that thought process, the question just came in expanding on that, which is, so can I also integrate a CI pipeline so that perhaps an engineer could understand secondary effects of their proposed change?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is definitely one of the primary examples of and workflows, honestly, of how we want the version control app to kind of be consumed in the end is, you can imagine webhooks that would be attached to pull request events. Just like GitHub works today, exactly right. So like we can kick off a webhook when someone opens a pull request that launches a CI pipeline, maybe in traditional CI/CD infrastructure, even like in a Jenkins or a GitHub Actions, even, right? Or in some other way, like maybe we're kicking off an Ansible playbook somewhere else, or even job hooks integration, where we're doing that testing and validation within Nautobot itself through jobs that we've written, so that we can take the proposed change, as you mentioned, and maybe build a proposed intended configuration, diff it against what's actually out there today, and provide that back as feedback to the person that submitted the PR, right? Just like you would expect in a traditional CI/CD pipeline. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, as you all probably saw, John was really excited about talking about the version control piece, even though it was just kind of one of the sneak peeks. But as those of us that really want to embrace the DevOps methodologies, this is finally bringing true DevOps and network management. And so that's why we get so excited about it, even though it's been a long journey and it's still a journey yet to go. It's going to be really incredible as we begin to really empower teams to operate in true DevOps fashions as they manage their networks. Another question here about what about modeling fleets of software load balancers like HA Proxy and NGINX in the new load balancer model?
Yeah, so definitely we think that our data model will be able to support use cases like that. If you have, some specific constraints, we'd certainly love to hear your feedback. You can reach out to us through, Slack, or reach out to Tim and team directly, right? And we can definitely take that feedback. But it's certainly within the domain of kind of what we're already designing within the load balancer app to support that type of use case.
And one final question, as with Git, is it typically used to back up your global configuration of Nautobot? So kind of an interesting concept here. I think it's about just like, how do I back up my Nautobot?
Yeah, it certainly could be, right? So one of the, I'll call it maybe unintended consequences of the way that the version control app works is it can actually be used to do that. Like I can create a mirror of the data that I've got in Nautobot, and I could have some other infrastructure that maybe syncs that over to another instance for different purposes. So yeah, it could certainly be used in that way.
Cool. So thanks everyone for all of your interest, your questions. Thank you for engaging with us as we went through this really exciting update that we wanted to bring to you. Just a quick recap here. So Nautobot 2.4, we went through a lot of cool core improvements, the updates we've made to our applications, and a sneak peek of what's coming next, especially cool stuff like version control and being able to handle your DOLT, or use DOLT, sorry, database to actually instantiate CI/CD pipelines into your network management process. Coming up, so here we have an answer for Sudeep. Hopefully you're still here on the webinar. For those that really want to engage and understand Nautobot, get hands-on experience, learn more, and really get into the details, take our 100 Days of Nautobot Challenge with Eric Chow here at NTC. You can register using the link down below and really get into the details, have practical hands-on labs along with learning from Eric directly as you move through that session. Great way to get engaged, to understand, and really also get engaged with the community. There's been a really active community of folks going through this process, both on LinkedIn and in the Slack channel. So if you need help as you're going through, you can reach out in both of those places to engage and find that. But we did just drop the links as well for you in the chat, so you can click them there rather than having to grab them off the screenshot if you like. Thank you everyone for attending. Here are some links to all things Nautobot related, both to the project as well as to the applications and the documentation. As always, if you're interested in seeing a hands-on demo, please reach out to us. We would love to set up a one-on-one session with you and your team. We can go through and show you the advantages of the platform, but also advantages of working with Network to Code and what value we bring beyond just what you get from the open source project. So thanks everyone again for joining us for this exciting update to Nautobot 2.4, our mega release. Thanks, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.